Okay. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and officially welcome everyone, and we're going to kick off this third episode of Trisomy Talks. And I want to thank you all for hopping on. If you registered, great. If you didn't, that's fine too. You don't really have to. It's just an easy way for us to communicate with each other. And then I anticipate sometimes there might be follow-up things that I can send after the fact. So if I have your email, whatever way you got the link to this, we can get back in touch with you if need be. So thank you for participating, and thank you for all your encouragement and support. It was really a blessing to when people would register. A lot of times there'd be a little comment in there, and they were just so encouraging. So thank you for all the positive comments, and thank you to our panelists who are here with us this evening and ready to share their stories with you, and stay afterwards and answer questions or share more stories. Whatever route this takes, I'm just really excited to sit back and listen to them share. So I appreciate all of them. And we do have one. Antoinette had to bow out because of some family things going on this evening, so she will not be with us. But we appreciate you other 5 ladies that have volunteered your time and poured some thought and energy and maybe prayer into this as well. So thank you for that. And without further ado, we're going to start with Chelsey Crawford, and I will let her share her story, and you take it away.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Hi, my name is Chelsey, and I reside in the Pearland area, which is a suburb of Houston, Texas. And my son, Jazz Ellington Scott, is 1 year old, and he is full trisomy 18. Our trisomy talks this evening is in relation to racial disparities, or the way that I assume our conversation will go is about racial disparities within the trisomy community, which is pretty hard to detect because our children with the diagnosis alone are discriminated against and are not supported by the medical community at large. So when you add a racial element to it, it becomes a little more difficult for us. One point that I'd like to make is that our problems typically start prior to the diagnosis. It starts as soon as we get those 2 pink lines. We have disparities in care for Black women on an obstetrical level, and we just do not have support when we're pregnant. So even beyond the diagnosis of trisomy 18, when most women typically start to see differences in treatment, Black women typically tend to get it during the early stages of pregnancy. So that's one point that I'd like to make. Our journey begins at pregnancy to get equal treatment, to get doctors and nurses and the medical community on board with proper treatment. There's this idea that we can take pain at a higher rate than most people. There's this idea that we have this superhuman strength. And so, unfortunately for us, the plight begins at that point. And so then we get to the diagnosis of trisomy 18, and we're faced with unbridled prejudices from the diagnosis to just us being Black in America in the medical community, and this idea that we don't love and care and want our children, and that we just really that we don't care. So for me, it began with a diagnosis at 27 weeks of trisomy 18. But I had a doctor, Dahlia Magazi, who supported me through my entire pregnancy and gave me adequate treatment, equal treatment. She is a graduate of an HBCU medical school, which is Meharry. So I was able to pretty much navigate the waters a little easier. I'm older, I'm 40. So I was able to ascertain who I could get on my side and whom I could get to give me the absolute best treatment going forward with the trisomy 18 diagnosis. And once I had Jazz, um, it was hard at first to determine exactly what was prejudices that I was facing because of his trisomy 18 diagnosis. And, initially in that, I kind of had full faith that I would be treated just like any other parent with the same diagnosis. And the further along that I got into Jazz's care, I faced certain doctors who had been in the um, medical community for well over 50 years. And so some of their prejudices carried over into the care of my son. And so at first, honestly, I could not see it. And I'm saying this as a Black woman, as a parent of 6 children. Jazz is the youngest of 6. And so I've had probably 3 OBGYNs over the course of all of my pregnancies. And so initially, I could not see it. And normally, I see those kinds of things very early. I'm able to pick up on even the most minute hints of racism and a disparity, but I didn't see it initially. But I just thought that Jazz was being treated like other trisomy 18 babies, and that we're all um, we all face prejudices. And so then I started noticing that I had one doctor in particular in the NICU level 4 at Texas Children's Hospital, who said that my son wouldn't be a contributing member of society, able-bodied or disabled. And it kind of took me for a loop, um, even as astute as I claim to be when it comes to things regarding race. And so it took me back, and it reminded me that I was not only fighting for my son as a trisomy 18 baby, I was also fighting for my son as a Black trisomy baby. And, luckily, given my background and my medical experience, I was able to remember, and other parents that I met in the trisomy community, in particular, mothers and families of color who reached out to me on an individual basis and gave me hope that my child could make it. I remembered that in the NICU level 4, when it comes to babies who are born premature, babies who are born with genetic abnormalities, and babies who are born with issues, that children of color do well. They do well, and they do well than do in many cases better than their counterparts. So I was able to rely on statistics that were not available to me, that people didn't readily give me the information on. I was able to rely on verifiable facts to give me hope that my son could make it. I was able to advocate much much further than just being a trisomy 18 parent, but also um, being able to advocate for him as his mother, as a mother of color, as his Black mother whom had to face whom I've had adversities as well as an obstetrical patient, but also as a mother of a trisomy 18 baby. Um, I've had conversations about mothers who reached out. And to be quite honest, within the trisomy community initially, it was hard to navigate the waters. I was on one trisomy group page, and I realized that page wasn't really supportive of mothers who chose to carry their babies to term and mothers who chose interventions for their babies. And so, of course, I thankfully made my way over to Soft, and I met mothers across all spectrums, and in particular, just for me on a trust level, just to be completely honest, mothers of color babies who hadn't made it, and I was able to kind of find my tribe, and from there, I was able to connect with other mothers of all backgrounds, and we kind of solidified a camaraderie, came together, and we were able to share information. But it was very hard to break through. Breakthrough in the medical community, breakthrough in the trisomy community. Everybody has their cliques. And just get to a point where I was able to get the information that I needed to provide the best care for Jazz. And without these mothers that I was able to connect to, I just don't think that he would be here. I believe I joined the SOFT group in April of 2019, and the very first child that stuck out to me was Cheyenne. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Michelle Jordan, because she opened this dialogue wide open for us to have this discussion, and she did so, and she stood her ground, and she was able to articulate her feelings in a way that made the rest of us kind of comfortable coming out and saying exactly how we felt in our experiences. So I really want to give her that. And I want to also, before I end my time, give a lot of recognition to the SOFT group, to the Trisomy 18 rare parents group, and to everyone who reached out across racial lines, who reached out and helped me help my son. So that's where I will end it with that. Hopefully other mothers are able to step in and talk and speak about their experiences, because we have varied experiences. Black people are not a monolith. We don't all have the same exact experiences. We aren't all the same exact people. When you meet one, you haven't met all of us. And so with those things in mind, I hope that everybody's able to listen to each of us as we present our stories and our experiences with an open mind, and understand that we don't come into this with the idea that we are better, or that we demand more. We demand fair, we demand equal treatment, and we demand that our children are treated just like any other child without syndrome. So I want to thank you for inviting me to the panel, and the floor is open for the next mom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsey. The way I have my computer, it's like you're just talking right to me because you're the speaker view. And I really appreciated hearing your story. You were someone I didn't know before the panel, and in the discussion, your name came up, and I'm so thankful that you were willing to step out and do this. And also, before I go on to Brooke, thank you for mentioning Michelle Jordan. I sent a Facebook message to her. We're not Facebook friends. I tried to connect with her because her post really, you're right, it was the reason that we did this, and I thank her. And if you're Facebook friends with her, please pass that on from me. She doesn't know me. I commented on her thread, but a lot of good discussion. So awesome, great shout out. And we're gonna go right on to Brooke Fontenot. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi everybody, can y'all hear me? Okay. My name is Brooke Fontenot. My daughter is Phoenix Fontenot. She's 18 months. I live in Rosenberg, Texas, which is also a suburb of Houston, Texas. Phoenix was born at Texas Children's Hospital. She had heart surgery at 1 day shy of 1 month old. And today she's weaned off of her vent. She's preparing for decannulation, and we're also preparing for foot surgery to correct vertical talus, boost the vision that she has. To piggyback on what Chelsey said, I have some numbers to kind of back up so the number for Black women is 40 deaths per 100,000. And for white women, it is 12.4 per 100,000. And I'm citing Harvard Public School of Health. If you Google it, there's a lot of other studies that support what we're saying. We're not just making it up. It is a hard fact that we are ignored as patients. So imagine if we are ignored as the mother, how does that trickle down to our children? So like Chelsey said, the fight starts for us when we get those 2 pink lines. A little bit of background about my upbringing. My parents are in their 70s, so they came up, during civil rights era. My parents, especially my dad, instilled in me and my brother, when it comes to dealing with white people to be on the defense about not only overt racism, but covert racism. And for me, I can't speak for everyone, it's sort of like a sixth sense that you develop in your childhood. And it's something that you're taught to always be aware of. So when I go to the doctor, or when I first started on this journey with Phoenix, that's something that I had on the back of my head, because I knew our babies are discriminated against because of their diagnosis. And then I knew my child had that extra layer because she was a Black child. So for me, when interacting with someone for the first time, that's always in the back of my head, and that's just a defense mechanism. That's just a defense mechanism that has been instilled in me. And Chelsey pretty much had a lot of the same points that I have. So that's the little bit that I wanted to add to the conversation as well. I'm very thankful that we're having this open dialogue, because it needs to be talked about. It needs to be hashed out. There's a lot of blind spots that we all have. So I'm glad that can provide some perspective people, so we can close those blind spots. So I hope that this discussion serves that purpose. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Brooke. If you speak a little bit later, it's showing that your bandwidth is a little bit low. The sound, I think we could hear most of what you said, but it was cutting in and out a little bit. So I don't know if there's a better place in your house, but and maybe it'll get back. You're still a little bit choppy, but I think I heard most of what you said, and thank you. I got a message from a participant saying, I wish Dr. McCaffrey could have participated in this session. And I will just put that out there, that one of my hopes is that we can share this video afterwards. It will be on the Trisomy Talk YouTube channel, and we'll put it out there. And absolutely, let's share it with medical professionals and anyone. I mean, it's an important discussion. So thank you, Brooke, for sharing. We are going to go next to my friend Jamila. And we got connected when Verity, my daughter, was still in my womb. And so she is a special friend to me, and I will just pass the baton right over to you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jamila Washington. My son was Quinzel Washington. We affectionately called him Baby Q. And if you hear me talking about him in the past, he only lived to 3 months old. And a lot of what the other lady said. I have a slightly different story. My parents, like Brooke, they're in their late 60s, early 70s, grew up in that civil rights era. My mom grew up in Mississippi, which is a very known for being a very racist state and back then. And so my mom is very, we call and say she's very militant. She trusts no one. So when I got pregnant with Baby Q and had my first doctor's appointment, everything went fine, normal, did all the testing. I was like Chelsey, I was older. I was 38 when I was pregnant with him. And so when I got the diagnosis that he had trisomy 18, from that point on, my mom went to all of my appointments that she could with me. And so surprisingly, we had a pretty decent, fair experience. We never felt like we were being discounted by our race or by his diagnosis. And maybe because of my personality, I was very no nonsense, and I was just like, we're not talking about ending this pregnancy, so we can just take that off the conversation. And you're not God, so don't tell me what you think might happen. We don't know, so we're just going to do the best we could. And but I was also lucky that I think my high risk doctor was this white man, but he was from South Africa, which I think kind of made him very open and very encouraging to me during, all my visits with him and the doctor. And then I'm sorry, I didn't even tell y'all where I'm from. The other ladies are from the Houston area, and I am also from the Houston area. Unlike them, I did not deliver at Texas Children. I delivered at the Women's Hospital. And my OB arranged for me to meet with the NICU team before I had my baby. And they were able, in that meeting, the neonatologist, he was very reaffirming, very reassuring, but he was also very honest. He was like, you might encounter some doctors while you're here that will not agree with your, choice to fight for your baby. He goes, just remember, this is your baby and you're the one that's to fight for him. And so that was very reassuring. The charge nurse that was over the level 3 NICU was a Black lady. So that was, a blessing there. And she also arranged to be there the day I delivered. One of the other ladies, one of the charge nurse for the level 2 NICU, she was there, and actually her sister had just had a trisomy 18 baby, and she wasn't Black, but she was Filipino. And so I was surrounded by all these women of color, of different races, to advocate for me, which I found was a very big blessing. And also we had, then once we were in the NICU, I was lucky to have Black nurses that cared for my child a lot, that I was able to make primaries and that have become friends, and that really just looked out for me and just told me little things. And I even had one of his primary nurses was a white nurse, but she was a fighter for him. She really, like, after a doctor would come and talk to me, she would look at me and she would ask me if I understood exactly what they told me. And, they give you so much information all at once. I was like, not fully. She was like, okay. And she would call the doctor back. And then she would ask the questions on my behalf. Like, she was like, okay, I'm not understanding. What do you mean by this and that? And so she was making the doctors break it down. I had one doctor, I can't even remember her name, that that 1 week was the worst week of care I believe we received. And unfortunately, she was a woman of color. And she just was very put off, very not, trying to work with me. All the nurses knew I showed up at the NICU at 9:30, 10 o'clock at the latest, and I would be there all day. So they would tell the doctor she'll be back. So they would do their rounds and come back at 10, when I would be there. She would never do that. She refused to wait. She would always call. And I was just like, so glad when that week was over to have to deal with that. When we had to deal with the Social Security office, surprisingly, that went smooth. When I called to make the appointment, the same lady that, and this is rare, I know this was, for me, all of God hand on this, was that she was working that same day that I had the appointment, and she pulled my name so that I could get my paperwork through fast, so I could get cleared for Medicaid or Medicare. I always get those two confused, whatever you get for the kid. So that was a blessing right there. Also, like when we came home from the hospital, looking for a doctor to take care of him, we did find a great doctor that loved on him, but she was a lady of color, a Black lady, and I appreciated her because she was like, I am not experienced in caring for a baby like this. So I appreciated her honesty, but she was like, I have these recommendations. She tried to help us as best as she could. And like I said, my mom was with me every step of the way. And the fact that she never said, like, I don't think we were treated fairly in that, because she is very, very skeptical. Me, I love everybody, and you have to be very blunt. And I think that was just a blessing on our experience as going through this, having that diagnosis of, trisomy 18, and then getting the care that we were receiving. And so I feel like, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but I feel like for our situation, being Black, we actually uh, I felt like we were favorites at the hospital, among the, even my doctor's office staff. They, like, when I would, like, go back for a visit, they were like, oh yeah, she wants to see you. My doctor always wanted to talk to me to see how I was doing, even to today. Actually, I just went yesterday to the doctor, and, she was like, oh, so excited to see your name on my list of patients. So they still ask about my son, even though they know he's passed away, and they still check on me to see how I'm doing. Even a year after his death, the nurse, the physician assistant, had sent me a note through the portal, and she said, I know today is probably a hard day, but I'm thinking of you. And she was a white lady, and, but just the fact that she remembered us and cared for us, and, did that extra mile for us, it was a different experience for me. I didn't feel like I had to do so much fight or, care for my son, or because we were Black or anything. Actually, when I talked to the NICU staff today, all they told me is that they were just amazed by our spirit, by the joy and the hope we had, knowing the condition we were in. And they said that drew them to us and wanted to fight for our kid, because we were just so excited that he made it that far. And so, like Chelsey said, we all have different stories and different experiences through this. But I will say that in our experience, it wasn't so much a struggle of, the trisomy, or the, us being a Black family and stuff. But I felt like we were just loved and cared for and looked out for. And maybe we were looked out for more because we were a Black family. So all the Black staff was, looking out for us to make sure we were taken care of and not being dismissed or anything. So I really appreciate that. But I do know that that is not always the case. I'm not naive to that matter. But I do appreciate that the experience we had was a positive experience. So thank you for letting me be on the panel also.
Thank you for sharing. That it's encouraging and shows the wide range of experiences. So I appreciate hearing all the different stories. And I'm a little bit distracted because I see Phoenix. Hey, sweet girl. Okay, Nina is next if she's ready. Yes, she's here.
I'm ready.
Nice.
Sorry about that.
No.
Good evening, everybody. I am Mina Perkins. I am from Detroit, Michigan, and I am the mother to Mila Perkins. She is 8 years old, and she has full trisomy 18. My story kind of echoes a little bit of the other ladies' stories. Mila has had open heart surgery. So she was born in March of 2012. She had open heart surgery that July at a local hospital. And at the same time during the open heart surgery, she went into some respiratory distress. So now she has a trach, and she of course has a G-tube. My story is really, I think I kind of can relate to Chelsey a little bit in that, because I was trying to fight for Mila's life so hard, that if there were certain instances in the early years where we were possibly discriminated against because of our race, I didn't see it. I was so focused on the trisomy 18 discrimination that was really at the forefront of every thought and every experience and every interaction that I had with any doctor. We were encouraged, given options to abort by a hospital. Of course, we declined. She was birthed at that hospital. The birthing experience was very, very sketchy, of course, but that is all based on the trisomy 18. I can honestly say that she has had great care in the health system that we have chosen to use for her care. Her pediatrician is very supportive. My OBGYN was very supportive. And I don't think that I experienced any type of racial bias until I actually went to the hospital that we choose for her care is like 25 to 30 minutes away. But Mila had a seizure one night, and she had to be taken by EMS to a hospital here in Detroit. And it was at that hospital that I think I had like my first experience of a doctor or staff treating us a little bit differently. So what you have to understand is about Detroit and the hospital organization that we were using, that she had to go to. It is in an area, or is accessed by individuals within the city of Detroit who may have a different socioeconomic status than a lot of other people. So it is, your local hospital, and it's in an urban area in the city. And so I think that based on different experiences that the hospital staff and doctors had with previous parents, Black parents, they kind of were used to dealing with a certain type of family status. So what I mean is that they probably were used to dealing with a lot of single Black mothers where there's no father in the home, possibly. They were probably used to dealing with a lot of families that were poor, and it's just, what it is. They were probably used to dealing with a lot of families who come, mothers and possibly fathers who come from backgrounds where they don't have access to the best education. And so it was during that experience where I had to really advocate for Mila to a point where I had to step outside of what I like to be. And I had to express to a doctor, that you don't treat people a certain way because of where they come from or how much money they make. That's a child that you're treating, and you should treat the child as you would any other child. Just because a family is poor and Black and maybe uneducated and does not have the resources to research certain information about the medical community and research certain things about procedures and medications, and they don't come in as I was able to come in and just kind of talk to them and tell them what I wanted, ask them questions about what they were doing, advocate for Mila as they were trying to send her home with, she hadn't opened her eyes after this surgery, and they were just trying to get us out of there. It wasn't until I had to really step out of myself that they kind of switched it up. And that really made me very, very sad, because it made me think about all the other children who have possibly came before Mila, trisomy 18 or not, that probably weren't given the best care because their parents or their guardian did not know how to fight for them. We had another experience as well when she was in the hospital, and I think this was more so that the doctor really didn't know how to deal with families who didn't look like him, where Mila was sedated during her open heart surgery and she was recovering, and there was a palliative care team that would come and see us on a day-to-day basis. And there was one particular doctor, he was the head doctor. I kind of, felt a little iffy about him. And he would make remarks that just were not appropriate for the time that we were in. And there was one African-American physician that was on this team. And being an African-American, you do try to seek out other African-Americans because we feel like we can relate. So anytime I go to the hospital, Mila just went to the hospital just this past March. And I can honestly say this was the first time in 8 years that Mila had a Black nurse. And this was the first time that she had a Black female nurse and a Black male nurse. And that was her first male nurse she had ever had. And I was truly amazed that there were African-American nurses providing service to Mila. And it made me feel very proud, to be honest with you. But this particular doctor, I think he saw that the remarks that my reaction to the remarks that the physician was making, And I think he understood from my body language and just my facial expressions that I was not really feeling this doctor. And so he, one day he came by himself, and I asked him, I said, well, where's the rest of your team? He said, well, I kind of felt, what was going on. I seen your face and I seen how you were reacting, and he just didn't get it. And he said, I told them from now on, I'm going to handle your family by myself. And for the duration of Mila's stay, while she was under their care, he stayed with us and he provided that care until we decided that we no longer wanted, no longer needed the support of that palliative care program. And I really, really appreciate him for that, because, it had turned into an awkward interaction between us and that doctor, to where I'm not really one to, because I was so hard on trying to advocate for Mila and making sure that, people who came in contact with her, they didn't do anything, because I had heard so many horror stories about the way Trisomy 18 children were treated. I didn't want to ruffle the feathers, is really what I'm trying to say. Mila wasn't in any danger that I could detect at the time. So that's why I really didn't say anything. But I was so glad that he got, he was able to sense what was going on, and he could relate to the way that I was feeling, and that he stepped in and took over for us. And then the only other time that I had a personal experience with discrimination was this particular night. Mila had been having seizures for a long time. And so this one night she had a seizure, and we ended up having to bag her for like 45 minutes. She just couldn't come back from the seizure. And so me and my sister jumped in the car, I bagged her, and we drove to a local hospital. And with the Trisomy 18, one of the problems is that you have to be careful when you take your child, because not everyone will treat them. And so we had been to the one hospital downtown, and I told them I would never bring her back there. And then I couldn't make it to the other hospital because it was too far away. So I took her to another hospital that was a little bit closer. And we get out of the car, and I'm holding Mila in my arms and bagging her. And the lady would not go get help for me because she did not have my license and my insurance card. As I was screaming for someone to help me get help for my baby is not breathing. 3 interactions with her. I had to tell her 3 times. I had to beg her to go get help. And it wasn't until I could see a nurse off in the distance that, I bust in the door. She was triaging someone, and I said, I need you to help me. My baby is not breathing. And she took Mila and took off running. And I took my license and my insurance card, and I threw it at the young lady. And I was so upset because she didn't want to give her name once we got back to the back of the room. And I called them the next day, and I told them, because this hospital is in a city that is known for racial discrimination against African Americans. And I told the nurse that I talked to, I said, you cannot tell me that that young lady would not go get help for my baby because we were Black. I said, she thought we did not have insurance. And I said, that is the reason why she did not go get help for my baby. And the lady could not disagree with me. She could not. And that made me so sad and so afraid, because other people may encounter her and they may experience the same thing, and they may not be able to, either contain themselves or be able to get the help that they need. Mila was not breathing. So, she could have, if we weren't bagging her, that could have affected her brain. It's just so many different things that I had to think about in that moment. And it still angers me literally to this day to know that that happened. But, now she's seizure-free, been seizure-free for 5 years. But, I'm really thankful for the trisomy community. That's one reason why I'm so active on social media and I share Mila, because I want other African-American parents to see that there are other African-American trisomy 18 children. When I first joined the community a long time ago, it wasn't that many. And like I said, when you're African-American, sometimes you tend to look to another African-American because you can kind of relate to them on a different level. And so that's where we kind of gravitate to be comfortable. And I'm just really, really glad that as the years have gone on, I see more Black and brown faces joining our groups, and I see more Black and brown babies. And it just makes me so happy, so that, any other families that is searching for help, they can see that our babies do survive. We can get care at places, and there are other parents who are walking the journey the same as you, and that we can be there for each other. So I thank you for the opportunity. And it's just been a real joy. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I met you from a distance, Mina, at the Soft conference a couple summers, 2 summers ago, and I didn't get a chance to visit with you there, but we've sort of gotten to know each other a little bit on Facebook, and I appreciate. Of course, you're a veteran mom now too, so people like me, like Verity was literally the baby of the conference. She was the tiniest one there, and so I appreciate all. I feel like y'all are pioneers in a sense. And now I get to hear another level of how you've been a pioneer. So thank you so much for advocating, not just for your daughter, but for the community. We are going to go to our last panelist, and then it'll be open for questions. So those of you that are listening, if you have particular questions, whether it's for a certain panelist or for anyone to answer, you're welcome to pop them in the chat so we can hear them, and then people can start thinking, how they want to answer, and we'll go into that. But I'm going to mute myself, and we're going to go to Kathleen.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, ladies. Well, thank you all for inviting me. I was very nervous. This is completely not something I typically do, but I felt Miss Beverly reached out to me, and I had been with all of this that's been going on lately. I had felt, what's my part and what should I do? And then you messaged me. And so I'm Kathleen Smith, and my daughter's Lily Smith. She has full trisomy 18. We live in Northwest Arkansas. And ironically enough, I was talking with my husband, and I said, hey, they're going to do this Zoom meeting, and I was just wondering, do you feel like we faced specific discrimination against Lily because of her skin color? And he didn't think he had either. And what I realized is that I think I was probably, and him as well, blinded by the trisomy diagnosis, because I didn't trust anybody and I didn't believe anybody. And so that's all I could see was, you're judging her based on her diagnosis. But that doesn't mean that the other discrimination wasn't there as well. I really wanted to come on here and just try to encourage, especially white people, to understand that we don't understand. I didn't grow up in a home that was political. My mom's from England. I didn't grow up with racial jokes or slurs. So I grew up, and I remember driving on my dirt road in the country, and I was going to give this big speech about racism and how there's only the human race, and which I never did that speech. But what I realized when I got pregnant with my son when I was 20, and a lady asked me if I was prepared to raise a biracial son, and I was upset with her. It was a white lady, and I'm like, no, I'm not, because it didn't matter to me. But then I realized that that was part of my ignorance, because it does matter, and it matters to my children. And it doesn't matter if you have Black friends or a Black family. It doesn't mean that you get it. And so I just want people to be gracious and kind and patient and really try to put themselves in someone else's shoes. Discrimination against color is a real thing. And like you said, there's people that have different stories, and some may have had worse stories than others, but I just feel like we need to be gracious to each other. We need to listen to each other. So I'm really thankful that everyone decided to do this. And I just really hope that it encourages somebody. Lily, we faced so much I say discrimination. They always were willing to do things, but it was always preceded with, she probably won't survive. It's not going to help her anyway. But I feel like we did have a good group of medical professionals on our side, and I'm thankful for that. But I do know that discrimination is real, racism is real, and I hate that it is, but I just wanted to try to do something and try to be a part of something better. And so that's why I chose to come on here and try to share my story. I don't know what else to say.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I appreciate, I know you stepped out of your comfort zone to do this, and I so appreciate you doing that for us tonight, because you're right, you know, we have a lot to learn. I see one question so far in the chat, but we can open it up. And if there's not a lot of background noise, feel free, especially panelists, go ahead and unmute yourself so you can chime in. The first question that I see is, how can our trisomy groups better support Black moms?
Hi guys, it's Chelsey. The one thing is, and I could be, no pun intended, in the minority on this, but sometimes I kind of feel like I shouldn't have to tell you certain things. I mean, we've lived in this country for a long time, and there are certain underlying things, maybe not the most minute things, but there are some things that, honestly, I feel like we should research on our own, maybe. Maybe that's a great way of saying it. When I'm telling you guys that it is hard for even me, and I feel like like I said, once again, it's even hard for me to kind of determine when there's a difference between trisomy and racism. This is the one avenue that I think, and I've said this in the soft group, that trisomy is it is literally the only prejudice that I can think of that comes close to what African American people face. And when I say that, I mean, I don't see anything else close. I've seen many people try to bridge other struggles with the struggles of African American. But when I think of the trisomy community, and I think of parents being told flat out to their face that your child does not matter, being verbally told that your child is not worth breathing, that this would be an equalizing moment for you to understand that although those exact words aren't always said, that this is the sentiment. You know, it's not politically correct to say that, but this is the idea. And for me, I think if any other parent can connect to what it means for me, the closest, not to say equal, but the closest, to me is a trisomy mom and dad, because they know what it's like for someone to say that you don't count, to say that your child will never contribute to society, that your child is less than. I can't think of any other group, and I stand by my words when I say what I say. I can't think of any other group who should get it the way I feel that trisomy parents should get it. So I feel like that's the bridge for me in understanding that although everything appears to be one way, I mean, there are other parents who go into hospitals and their children are born early. They're 24, 25 weekers. And they will speak with me. And my experience is in the NICU level 4 at TCH. And they talk to me, and they almost talk to me as if we're having the same experiences. You know, we have the same doctors, we have the same attendings from different specialties. But what they don't understand is, although we're all in the NICU 4, their experience is not the same as mine. Their child has been determined or predetermined to have hope. Their child is hopeful. My child is supposed to, quote unquote, be hopeless. And so that idea is, to me, that same kind of train of thought. We're all here together. We're all trisomy moms and dads and families. And we all have this mountain, this huge mountain to climb. But I want you to understand that although we have the same doctors, we have the same access, that my climb is slightly different than yours. Yes, both of our children have G-tubes. Yes, both of our children need open heart surgery. But the doctor has determined that your child's heart surgery and G-tube is temporary and it's only for a little while. And at some point, your child will be a functioning member of society, worthy of all of these interventions. And my child, I'm just, you know, hamster wheel. And so when I think of those things, I think of us in that way. So if you can see things in that way, then maybe you can connect with us, because that's exactly what it is. You know, I have so many people that I have met and I have befriended in this listening experience, or in this experience of dealing with Jazz not only being a trisomy 18 baby, but being born at 34 weeks. So I have a preemie and I have a trisomy baby, and beating odds is something that he's done since the moment that he was born. And although our children are here together, right next door to each other, we have the same doctor, same access, your child is being given opportunities that mine isn't, simply because of a diagnosis. And in the same breath that I say that, we're all running this trisomy race, but my son is an African-American son. We're all wanting the same thing. I don't want better for Jazz. I want the same. And I think if nobody else, a trisomy family, mother, father, would get that. That's all we want, is equal treatment. And like I said at the beginning of this, I can't think of anybody else in all of my 40 years that I've ever encountered. And there's been many groups who have tried to align themselves with the plight of Blacks. Nobody, absolutely nobody, I feel like, understands that level of prejudice. Maybe not the same, but even close to that level of prejudice as the families in the trisomic community, because you guys know what it's like for somebody to tell you you don't count, and to an even greater level, to your face. You know, we get all these recordings of people saying the most egregious things, and now we have social media and we're seeing it. See, as a trisomy family, we see this and we don't need a recording. I don't have to convince you guys that these people say the things that they say about Jazz. I don't need to record it. I don't need it to be, I don't need all of the evidence. You guys immediately believe what I'm telling you. And I feel like as a parent of color, I'm Black, these things happen. It happens to Latino families. I have encountered trisomy 13 moms, two in particular, one whose mother was threatened with immigration. Mm. That is racist. And she was scared for her son and did not get interventions because she was afraid of being deported, and her son passed away. And that weighs on my heart. So I think for me, just understanding that what you're experiencing as a trisomy parent and that frustration, that's what we feel added. That's an added thing. And that's what we feel with the rest of our able-bodied children. This is our life. This is what we go through. And as just to add this on and not to take up any more time, I want to say that recently, even as of yesterday, having necessarily Black skin does not make you a trisomy advocate, nor does it make you always an advocate of the plight of another Black patient. The same doctors that do not value Black life on the table, that the same things are being taught to some of these Black doctors. Of course, I was able to avoid one of those doctors, thankfully to Brooke here at TCH. But just having Black doctors is not enough. It's understanding what it's like to deal with prejudices. And that might not necessarily be a Black doctor. Some of Jazz's, my favorite doctors from Jazz, for my son, has not always been Black doctors. It is somebody who is, as our moderator has stated, somebody who is willing to step in the shoes, and also Catherine, willing to step in the shoes of someone else for a second and see how we feel. So it's not always necessarily that you're Black, because like I said, just yesterday, I had to talk to a quote unquote professional Black person in the medical field on Instagram who was putting out false information about trisomy 18. And another mother in the trisomy community, wasn't of color, pointed it out to me. And I said, look, we can't have people who look like me putting out false information, because as we've all stated, we trust each other to a certain level, a little bit more than we may trust other people. So we can't always depend on that. This is just this this need for us to have fair and balanced information, fair and balanced opportunities, and just goodness, just an understanding between all of us beyond our color.
I was going to piggyback on that. And I think with that whole bridging the gap, I mean, yes, the trisomy family, and I use this analogy with Beverly, like that's what we go through with our other kids. And I think that's the disconnect, is that it's not just with our trisomy kids that we're fighting for. We are fighting for all of our kids in the regular school systems and everything, trying to fight for them to get the same treatment and to be seen equally and have potential and to do. And so we're fighting those battles, plus we're fighting for the care of our, trisomy baby and trying to get that kind of care. So we're just fighting all the time. And we have to know how to play diplomat, when to be very aggressive, when to, like you're just dealing with that all around, and it's tiring. And it can wear on you. And so, I mean, just support. And if you know that there's just this extra level of fight that we have to do. And not everybody has to, just depending on the circumstances that surround, not everybody has to fight as hard as the next person or whatever, but just know that there is that fight. And I think just having that awareness of it helps bridge that gap. And I won't say I shouldn't have to tell you, because I can't expect people to understand the struggles I'm going through, because nobody's walking my life. And so I might have to explain it to you, just like I have to explain, why I feel a certain way to my husband who, lives with me. But it's just, we have to do better of asking for what we need from you. But you also have to understand that sometimes we can't fully articulate it, although Chelsey does a great job at articulating it. We just know that if you just say, how can I help you? What do you need? That can go a long way. Or how are you doing today? How is the rest of your family doing? That could go a long way.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to jump in on that? I thank Jamila for bringing that analogy to me, because when I was having some conversations, I like Kathleen mentioned, I felt really naive, honestly. I mean, I know history, I teach my kids, and I felt like a lot of what we're seeing today, I really thought it was behind us, and my eyes were opened. I read Michelle's post and I wept. It just struck me to the core. And then we had this conversation on, chat, and it was like my eyes were open to, these, and honestly, Verity has had very good care. We had some very insensitive comments when I was pregnant from a doctor who thankfully did not enter into our care plan at all. But just that was so hurtful for me. And so for me to have that one experience, several experiences, to look back and kind of get a glimpse, just a tiny glimpse. I know it's not even close, but then to know that on top of that is another layer that you're digging through and you're fighting through. And it really spoke volumes to me of how much I have to learn. And really was, all of you ladies helped bring this to fruition. So thank you again for participating. Maria has questions and comments. I'll just read it out loud for those that are watching the video later. She writes, what can we do to bridge the gaps among our cultures and even within our own trisomy community that is at times also divided among the races? And then her comment, I thank you for bringing to light an issue that many of us had no idea existed in the medical community. This should be a future session at SOFT conference, and maybe have medical professional, a person of color, participate. So thank you, Maria, for your input. It's a similar question, so I'll just open it up if anyone wants to speak to that.
I just have one comment. So I think that if I think that some people may be able to, I don't think I really know how to say this, but in your personal life, make sure you have diversity, right? Because a lot of times, what kind of irritates me a little bit is when I see people who are not of color are able to quantify the number of persons of color that they interact with. So statements as far as like, I have, one Black cousin, or I have a Black friend. I never in my life have been able to quantify the number of white people that are in my life. I just have, I have friends who happen to be white, but if you ask me how many, I definitely could not quantify them to you. And I think that if in our personal lives, we start to become more diverse, then it helps us, and it kind of prepares us and enables us to be able to deal with issues that, other people who don't look like us may bring up, because we've surrounded ourselves with a diverse population. You have to be willing to go outside of what you're comfortable in. Sometimes where we're raised at, depending on where you're from. So for example, in my life, when I was in elementary school, I went to an elementary school in an area of the city that was diverse. There was Black kids and white kids. And then as I got older and switched schools, then I went to schools later from like the 5th grade on to high school, to where the population was 99.9% African American. So that is what I'm used to being around. But for me, my family, my mother's side of the family, there are, even though they're half minority, my mother is Hispanic and Black, her sisters and brothers are white and Hispanic. So that's where a lot of my personal interactions came from, was because I had a lot of family members that did not look anything like me, because my mother is the only African American child that my grandmother had. So from an early age, I was around individuals, though they are minorities, they definitely can pass for white. So to me, they were just white as I was younger. And then as I got older, I realized that they were actually Hispanic. And then, their father was Caucasian. So, but it helped me navigate just in our world. So when I go to work and I'm around white people, or Black people, or Hispanics, or there's a large Indian population at my job, it's not a shock to me. And that's why I say I can't quantify how many of those people are my friends, or how many of those people I work with on a daily basis. So it also creates an opportunity for me to have conversations with those people, to say, tell me your culture. I had a young man who, he is from India, and he and I were working together, and we were just having casual conversation about life. And he goes off to tell me, explain to me how they name their children, and where, how different parts of India and how they have different cultures. And it was amazing to me. And it was such a great conversation that I really felt weird at a certain point, because I'm like, we're supposed to be working, but we're actually talking about something that it just made me feel so good to learn something different about someone else who does not look like me. And that's what I can appreciate about having a diverse circle, and working in a place that does support diversity and inclusion, because it does help me deal with, people who may not look like me, or who may come from different areas. Even though we may not be able to relate, there may be an opportunity for me to have conversations and gain an understanding about, what do you go through? What is your life like? How are we similar, but how are we different? And then I can also provide them with the insight that they may not have had access to had they not been able to, interact with me.
That's amazing that you say that, Mina, because I completely agree with you. And I think a lot of times, especially for people that are Black, like me, my specific experience is that I went to a culturally diverse high school. I went to a majority white college. So for me, being Black, even going to school didn't represent my overall interaction. So there was always interactions with people of different cultures. So I never had the ability to choose, if that makes any sense. I could never make the choice to necessarily seclude myself or to be only around certain people. So I've always been around a lot of different people. And what I find is that things like trisomy is what typically connects people who would never ordinarily even connect with each other. Because, I mean, let's be honest, you know, outside of our children being sick, and I can't speak for myself because I would speak and befriend anyone who deems themselves to be friendly to me. But some of us probably wouldn't even speak to each other on the street. And I think what you just spoke about kind of points to that we're all connected by a commonality, and that's the trisomy. And we're all so passionate about it. I think at the bottom of all of that is that passion, that drive, that motherhood in a sense, and not to say that any of the fathers aren't just as equally driven, but that the motherhood has superseded even race itself, and that we all want to see our children live and thrive. And that's to me, that's, you know, as of late in the way that our country, the state that our country is in right now, that is the single greatest hope that I have, that we're all able to put at least some of the time, because like I said, all of my experiences have not been positive within our groups, but most of the time we have been able to transcend everything when it comes to our children. We do not care what you look like. We don't care where you're from. We don't care about your socioeconomic background. If we all can share information that means that our children can breathe one more minute, we are all in, hands in. We don't care. We don't see color. And if we can capture that, little bitty piece of hope or a grain of salt, at least for me, there's this idea that we can kind of carry that over into other aspects of life. Because if we can sit on an internet board and get together for the sake of our children and for our children's lives and for their livelihood and for their life, then that means that we can do it any other time. It's just that some of us are making choices not to. That's what it said. That's what it says to me, at least. So I know that we can, and the trisomy community is a testament to that. And it is just a matter of wanting to do it. What is the choices that you're making? And you making a choice, like you said, extending it out into the community and into your real life, just getting to know each other. So I completely agree with you on that. I think we've all shown that we can get together for a common goal. It's just that we have to make efforts to want to, and to put wanting to do it into action. And for some of us, that may take effort. And like, I'm one of those people, and this is just who I am. If it's just killing you, don't do it. But I would love for what you're saying, for that to be something that's brought into fruition. We do need to get together and to stop with the stereotypes. You know, even in the hospitals, I'm always kind of concerned about coming off as an angry Black woman. I don't know what that is, but that is, oh my goodness. And and I'm just going to flat out tell it. We had a mother whose daughter was born as a micro preemie, and she constantly gave the hospital staff all kinds of hell, and it was acceptable. She was never worried about being put out of that hospital. But I always had to temper my passion for my son's life, and I always had to temper my will that I was trying to push on him and push onto everybody else, because I didn't want to come off as an angry Black lady. And that's something else, even within the community. I mean, I can't go on hollering and screaming and carrying on. I'm always worried about coming across as angry Black lady. And so, because it's going to come across as me being angry versus passion. Other people are afforded passion, and I'm angry. So that's something else that is something that's not even trisomy related, that we deal with outside of our kids' special needs that we deal with. So there's that. I just think that, like I said, our commonality, the trisomy, is certainly a grain of salt that we can take and season the conversation. And if we can do that, and we can come together for our children living and breathing and getting equal rights, we can do things beyond that too. It's just a matter of wanting to.
It was asked what we could do to bridge the gap. I would just implore everyone to do a self-check and ask yourself, what are my blind spots? What are some of the areas I'm maybe naive or ignorant in? This is a great time in America to educate yourself about Black culture. It's all about, it's all over the news. It's everywhere. So this is a great time to have those conversations with yourself. And then after you have that conversation within yourself, have it with your family, have it with your children, have it with your friends, your coworkers. So change starts with the individual. So just identify those blind spots and educate yourself. Step out your comfort zone, step out your bubble.
Good encouragement. Thank you, Brooke. I don't see any other questions, although Ryan had asked about, we were talking about Michelle Jordan's story. So I found the link for those who haven't seen her post. It is in the soft group as well. So I put that there. Any other comments or questions from listeners or anything, panelists, that you want to share with us before oh my goodness. It's
Miss Beverly?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to say also that, getting out of your comfort zone, like my uncomfortableness about being on a Zoom panel, it's nothing compared to what other people have had to go through. It's my own personal struggles, but it's not like it's a small sacrifice that I've had to make to try to be supportive and to show that I want to learn more. I want other people to learn more, and I want us to come together. So I didn't want it to feel like I had sacrificed much of anything by doing this. And also, I talked to Michelle when she was having problems with the hospital, and she called me. And I feel like I don't know a lot about medical things, even though I've learned so much more with Lily. I think I could be a RN, But I just remember when she called me, the things that she was telling me that these doctors were saying did not make any sense to me. It was the most absurd information that they were giving her, or advice, or whatever it was they were doing. It was like I didn't know what to tell her other than, this does not sound right. This isn't right, Michelle. And I just think it's absolutely horrific. And she isn't the only one, but I'm so glad that she shared her story and that other people can see what really goes on. And, just like small things, like even with my own children, I grew up in a small school and I wanted them to go to the small school. And I remember telling my husband and my children, like, I don't care if they like us or not. We're going to rise above this. Okay, that was my little thinking. And they're not going to kick us out of here. We're staying. And my son, I could be wrong, but his very first fight, I believe, was because a boy at that school called him a horrible name. And I just remember thinking, Kathleen, you're not in their shoes. You do not know. And they deserve to grow up in an area where there is more diversity, where they feel like they can fit in, and people don't use those words, hopefully, and make them feel isolated. And so we moved, and we did. And it's not that they won. We just chose a different avenue to continue to raise our children. But my husband, we have foster children, and we deal with DHS, OGC, many other people, doctors and stuff, and he prefers me to be the one to talk to them, because he's like a tall Black man, and he's just not sure how his approach may come across sometimes. Like I think Chelsey mentioned, people think you're an angry Black woman when you're being passionate, and my husband can be very passionate. He's very loud too. And so just those small things that people don't realize, he shouldn't have to feel that way, but it's legitimate. People are going to view him differently, or be harsher, or look at him harder when he's with the foster kid, and be more judgmental. And so we we have faced some of these things. My sister-in-law's up here, and she was like, Kathleen, when I went into Walmart, I feel extra nervous around white people right now. She's like, because I just don't know, like, are they cool? Are they not? You know, like, where do they stand? Because they're seeing all this stuff that's going on in the division that is going forth, and it's like, she shouldn't have to feel this way. She's a human being. And I think one way to bridge would be look at people as human beings. Like, you're a human being. I don't understand. You know, it's like a color does not make a difference, but it does, and it shouldn't. And so I just want to encourage people to really just try to be quiet and listen, I guess.
You know, that also, when you said that, it made me remember that we really haven't talked about the doctors a lot. We've talked a lot in this Zoom about how we interact with each other. And what we haven't talked about a lot is doctors. I know that Brooke is aware because I called her relentlessly and constantly because my son was mixed up with another African-American baby who was in the NICU at the same time as he was. And they had two completely different diagnoses. And I mean, maybe I probably should have said this during my introduction. This was one of those occasions where trisomy 18 kind of, I couldn't quite distinguish between whether it was a trisomy 18 thing or a race thing, because this child looked nothing like Jazz at all. And they had so many different issues. Jazz does not have, at this moment anyway, pulmonary hypertension. He didn't have CDH. There were so many differences between the two of them, but the one commonality was the two moms. The mom and I both were these tall Black women, kind of statuesque black women with locks and with blonde tips. But beyond that, you know, she probably was a lot more bubbly. We were both probably intense, but we were getting doctors who literally mixed up vent prescriptions and was putting our children on vent settings that were deadly to if you were meant to mix them up. And the doctor thought nothing of it, and they mixed our children up constantly. And this was within the first 6 months of life. And so it's just beyond this conversation. Like I said, this is something that could go on beyond today, beyond this conversation. So I had issues with doctors and nurses because they couldn't identify with Jazz. And I think that just amongst us in this group is just trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes. You know, when you look at Jazz, when you look at Mina or Phoenix or Egypt or Ayana or any of our children, if you just look at any of them, just look at them as a sister and brother of, and not look at them as a color. Because like I said, the medical community obviously can't do that. They look at our children and see trisomy, and for some of us, they see color too. And I had the unfortunate pleasure of having my son mixed up with a CDH, BPD, and pulmonary hypertension baby who was older than him by some 3-4 months. They didn't look alike at all, but the doctor, those was two little Black boys. It didn't matter. You know, you swing his PEEP up to a 16 when my son didn't need a PEEP of 16. He was at 9, and you could have killed him, but it meant nothing to you because those were just, they didn't look any different from each other to you. So even beyond just us, getting the medical community to understand, to look at our children and relate to our children is a thing. So it's multifaceted. It's nothing that we're going to solve today. But within the community, hopefully some of the, what I call OG parents, Miss Perkins, when we're talking about Makari's mom, or just for me in particular, the boys' mothers, because I was always told that my son would pass because he's a boy. He would never make it. And, you know, I see Miss Edwards' son. I found them on Facebook and Instagram. So I had to go digging because I like to see people who do look like Jazz, just so I know that it can happen. And it's not something that it's not a prejudice thing for me. It's not me thinking that there's a difference. I just need to see someone that I can identify with sometimes. And when I saw these babies, it was just amazing to me. And so I'd encourage even amongst the Black families to start promoting our children. I'm very private. I hate sharing things, but I try to because someone needs to see it. So it's not just the wait for our white counterparts. It's us too. I want to see our children. I want to see even our mixed race kids. If you're having mixed race children, you have put yourself in the same shoes with the rest of us. So you know your privilege is cut in half now. It's just what the truth of the matter is. And now you are in it. So when I see children like Sierra, and we have many mixed race children, so put our stories out so that these parents know that you don't have to terminate your pregnancy, that these babies can make it, that we just have to get in there in the trenches and put ourselves out there. Because some of us probably would terminate if we didn't know any better, but they need to see Makari. They need to see our children. And so put your kids out there so that we can all see them thriving and doing well. And me seeing Phoenix and me being able to reference Phoenix when I go into the hospital and say, hey, I know that you do heart surgery because Phoenix got heart surgery. Or I know, or when the parents come in and they get lied to, like a parent recently, oh, we don't do pacemakers on T18. Yes, you do. You did one on Jazz. So we can put names and faces together, and this can literally work across racial lines. We can push this forward. We just got to do it together.
And I just want to say one thing too about the sharing and showing the faces. What I can really appreciate, because I'll be honest with you, I was feeling away a couple years ago with the soft publications. I really, 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 from the bottom of my heart, appreciate that Soft has taken the initiative to, amend the publication so that it represents the diverse population that we have in the trisomy community. Because at any request, anytime there's any chance to share pictures, I'm always making sure I share Mila's picture. And it is for that reason that Chelsey just spoke about, so that other parents with Black and brown babies can see that, our kids do survive. Because that was really hard for me in the beginning was, after you get over seeing all the pictures of dead trisomy kids, you try to look for the children, that look like you, because there are so many disparities within the African American community as a result of race. As a result of health. So I wanted my question was like, okay, I see all the white babies. Is it that I heard the thing about the boys don't survive? Okay, but then I don't see any brown or Black babies. Do the brown and Black babies survive? Because I'm not really seeing that many. And so it was because of Marta, because of Caden, was one of the reasons why I started sharing. But I knew as I started, interacting with the communities, that I needed to make sure that I put Mila out there so that other parents who had children who looked like mine could see that, yes, our babies do survive. Yes, our babies can get heart surgery. Yes, they can thrive. Yes, they grow, and it doesn't mean that they're any better than anybody else's children. But I need, deep in my heart, I need my people to know that you can do this and we can take care of these babies. And there are people who look like you who will support you. Though our community is supportive, you will get supportive from everyone there. Because I'll be honest with you, sometimes in our culture, we are raised in situations where having a child with special needs is, you're raised to hide that person, like it's a secret. I don't know where that stems from, but sometimes you might hear some African American families say, like, hey, everybody got that one crazy uncle, but you never see him because he's in the back bedroom somewhere. We laugh and joke about it, but it is very, very true. So that's one of the reasons behind my passion for sharing Mila, is because I just need my people to know that there is a community that is here for you. And no, everyone doesn't look like us, but there are people who do look like us. And I think it makes it a little bit more comfortable for people to be able to reach out and ask for help, because people are sometimes so hesitant to share their stories, because you do have people who are very private because they don't know, like, I don't know what this is about, and I just want it to be where if someone is searching for help, that's because they don't see babies that don't look like theirs. That's not the reason why you don't reach out and ask for the help that you need.
I know for me, I have a loud mouth. I was never shy to share my story. I was always very public about my pregnancy, my son. I mean, even on my personal Facebook page, and when I found the group and joined it, creating my own story, my own group for keeping people up to date. And I will say it is good to share your story, because through that, I met so many people. Like, I had friends who were involved in the trisomy community, that they were like, I think I have a friend who had that, had a child that way. And one of the ladies that I became friends was Nancy Grimes, whose daughter Soleil is 28 years old and has trisomy 18, and she was a big encouragement. And her child was a biracial baby. And I mean, you just, yeah, share your story, because you don't know who's going to be there to support you and who you're going to come in contact. And I am always like, don't limit my blessings. Let me share, because God's got a whole army to support me. And, but also, I'm not going to be the one to advocate that you got to go and befriend every Black person that's in there. And, and you got to smile and grin at everybody. You're not going to mesh with everybody, and that's fine. But don't mesh because they're Black. Get to know them, and it might be a personality difference. It might be just that could be the reason why you don't mesh, and that's fine. And it, and I mean, even amongst the Blacks in the community, we don't all get along and don't all, think the same. And so, but that's fine. We are all individuals, and we're going to find our own tribe, just like Chelsey said, she found her tribe of ladies to support her and to encourage her, and that's her go-tos and stuff. And I'm sure I probably would have met most of these ladies if my son was still alive and had that tribe. But the tribe I had for that 3 months was amazing, just from me sharing my stories and finding out that other friends who had that diagnosis, who lost their babies, and going through that, and then me being able to support other women who have had the diagnosis and lost their babies, to be there with them and to walk through them, regardless of their race, their culture, whatever, but to be a support. And I am proud to be able to be that to people, to let them know their emotions are valid, that it's okay, and the whole spectrum of it all. And and so, but just if you see somebody who has a similar story to you, get to know them and talk to them. Most of the people I met, it was just that they were either pregnant or had just had a baby around the same time I was pregnant with baby Q and stuff. And so it's just keep yourself open. That's all I have to say. Don't discount people based on a perception. Get to know them and then make your decision.
Wise words, especially when we are all on the internet. And honestly, it can be hard to get to know people online too. And that doesn't, that's not limited to one race by any means. It's just difficult, but the bonds, that you do end up creating are so valuable and such a lifesaver when you're feeling like you're all alone. All right, we've gone an hour and a half. I'm sure we could chat some more. I am so grateful for each one of you ladies on the panel. Thankful for all of you who are here with us live, and I know many others are going to catch the recording later. Once it's out, feel free to share it. And again, we hope we can, pass this on, especially to the medical side of things, and get some circulation there as well. But thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And we'll see you maybe next time for our next Trisomy Talks.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.